we have now Mr. Jonathan Hoffman, prominent leader of the Zionist Federation of the United Kingdom and very vocal advocate of the State of Israel and against anti-Semitism and also against Holocaust. Mr. Hoffman, welcome to this interview.
Thank you. Good to be here.
First of all, under this current scenario that we are witnessing, that pro-Hamas mobs are demonstrating throughout the Western country, including United Kingdom, at a time when the State of Israel is fighting Hamas and other terrorist groups in Gaza for the sake of the security, peace and security of the entire region and the world. So being a leader of the Zionist Federation of the United Kingdom, will you please tell our audience how important is Israel's war against Hamas, and also what roles the Zionist Federation of the UK has been playing in combating anti-Semitism?
Well, thank you. I should say at the outset that the Zionist Federation was established in the 19th century as a umbrella organization for all the Zionist societies. Unfortunately, it doesn't really exist anymore. Its life should have been finished when the State of Israel was founded in 1948, because that was mission accomplished. But it went on to be a campaigning organization, but it was voted out of existence about 2 years ago, so that doesn't exist. Regarding your question about Gaza, one cannot overestimate how important and how tragic and how cataclysmic the events were on October the 7th and the aftermath. The deaths of over 1,000 Israelis on October the 7th is, if you look at I've seen figures now revising it to 1,200, so the figures are not yet settled, but if you think of it in proportion to the United States population, if it happened in the United States or it happened in the UK, it's really massive. And the whole of the Israeli population has been devastated by what happened. And indeed, many people throughout the world devastated as well. So this was the largest killing of Jews since the Nazis. And Israel has correctly determined that it will try to put an end to Hamas in Gaza. Now, we can talk about what that means, because you know, Hamas is an ideology, and it's difficult to, how do you put an end to an ideology? It still exists in people's heads. So we can talk about that. But what they've done is they've gone into Gaza with ground troops. They're now concentrating on the Al-Shifa hospital, where we have proof that the Hamas has its base in the basement of the Shifa hospital. And the challenge for the soldiers is how to eliminate the Hamas leaders without causing too much civilian casualties. And simultaneously, we have the hostages. Now, as you know, as your viewers will know, on October the 7th, Hamas took over 200 hostages into Gaza, and I think only 4 of them have been released. So where are the hostages? We just don't know. We've had no intelligence, no information about the whereabouts of the hostages, about their state of health, whether they're still alive. Last night, there were reports that a truckload of bodies had been taken out of Gaza into Israel, and the Zaka, which is the religious Jews who tend to the dead before they're buried, had received those bodies. So were they soldiers? Were they hostages? We don't know. So all we can do is sit and watch, and all of us have been watching the news. You know, we wake up 4 times, 5 times a night to look at the news. It's completely devastating, and I'm 70 years old. I remember nothing like this in my lifetime. So, you know, will it become a Middle East conflict? Will Iran be drawn in? We've already had the rebels in Yemen have already been drawn in. Lebanon, you know, it's a really, really complex and tragic situation we have at the moment.
You have described that the Hamas program in Israel on October the 7th, and all of us know that if we compare it with the 9/11, what has happened in Israel on 7th of October, it is 50 times more than what has happened during 9/11. I mean, in this age, this is the biggest terrorist attack in the world. And under such scenario, when Israel is fighting for the sake of safety and security of the region, not only its own safety and security, for the region and the world, we are unfortunately witnessing extreme hostility of the media, Western media, against Israel. And some media are shamelessly supporting Hamas and Palestinian terrorism. I mean, as a senior citizen and as an esteemed individual who have been fighting for the right of Israel and against anti-Semitism, how do you see this kind of media cruelty towards Israel and Jewish people?
Well, you know, we've been appalled by some of the media coverage. For example, the BBC takes the Hamas figures at face value. And one has to remember that the health ministry in Gaza, which gives the figures for casualties, is controlled by Hamas. And they say there's 11,000 casualties. We have no way of verifying that. Also, we have no division in the 11,000 between combatants and civilians. And I've seen in many media, they say Israel's killed 11,000 civilians. Well, that's just not true. Number one, we can't trust the figure. Number two, we have no division between combatants and civilians within the figure. So, and then of course, we know that journalists inside Gaza have to toe the Hamas line. If they somehow step out of line and criticize Hamas, they're in danger, their lives are in danger, and they certainly will be thrown out of Gaza. So, you know, we can't really trust the reporting that's coming out of Gaza, and we can't trust a lot of the reporting elsewhere. You know, the BBC has been shocking. And it's very difficult to know where one gets information from. We can watch the Israeli channels, Channel 11, if we speak Hebrew. We can look at some of the Israel websites in English. We can look at those. But you know, and the other thing is the visual images. Now, the images, obviously in wartime, the images can be horrible, and some of the images coming out of Gaza, they have no compunction in showing images of dead children, images of injured children. But we know that some of those images have nothing to do with the conflict in Gaza. They're simply taken from another sphere, another time, another country. They're fake images. Israel, on the other hand, does not publish routinely the war pictures. We know there is a a compilation of images of what happened on October the 7th, which has been shown to selected journalists in Israel and selected journalists in London as well. But the journalists are not allowed to show the pictures out of respect for the families, respect for the dead. So one has this asymmetry, this bias in the media. We have these horrible pictures from Gaza, or some of them are not even from Gaza. They're fake images, and really nothing from Israel. So there is a tremendous problem with the media. Really difficult to combat. Actually, the BBC this time has not been as terrible as it has been before. It's still pretty bad, but at least they've been interviewing the families of the hostages. They've been reporting on the atrocities of the 7th of October. I mean, how could they not, you might say? Well, they have been reporting on the tragedies, but they still, they take the Hamas figures as being the truth. They have a reporter in Gaza, and as I said, the reporter cannot deviate from what Hamas is saying. So yeah, there's some really difficult issues with the media, but one has to ask oneself, at the bottom, does it matter? I mean, what matters to me is that Israel should be successful and there should be as few casualties as possible from the IDF, the defense forces on the one hand, and as few casualties as possible on the other side, in Gaza, as few civilian casualties. The media can be the media, but I think the media is more of a problem for Jewish people outside Israel than for Jewish people in Israel, because we've seen the numbers of anti-Semitic incidents skyrocketing in the US and in the UK, where I live, and that is inevitably, that's a product of the media bias. So the media bias is not a problem for Israel; it's a problem for us outside Israel. Yes.
Mr. Hoffman, you will be happy to know that for the last more than 20 years, our newspaper, BLiTZ, is the only newspaper in the entire Muslim world which is confronting anti-Semitism, Holocaust denial, and we are not falling into the trap of anti-Israel and anti-Jewish propaganda. I fully agree with you that media in the world should not fall into the trap of Hamas PR activities. And as you said, that IDF has shared some images and videos with some journalists. We have also received, and we have seen those images that we cannot even show to our audience because it will not be good. But now when we are talking to you, we are showing some images and some video footages of IDF operations in hospitals, in schools, in Gaza.
I'm here in Gaza City. We are here next to a house of a terrorist. This is one of the senior terrorists who is the head of the operational naval operations that led the raids into Israel. His house is right next to a school. His house is 200 yards from the hospital of Rantisi. Next to his house, there is a tunnel. Now I want to show you an operational tunnel. The tunnel is built with electricity. We first saw the solar panels, then the electricity goes here, and it goes down directly to the tunnel. Now you can see the tunnel. So it's a covered tunnel, so nobody can find it. This is Rantisi Hospital. And this is the place where I showed you the tunnel. I want you to see. This is the back side of the hospital. Hamas used this hospital. Tonight we have entered into this building. I will show you the evidence. Let's enter into the hospital. We're now entering into the area of the hospital. where we had found the evidence. This operation was conducted by Israeli Special Unit, the Israeli Navy SEALs. This is still an operation that is conducting, and I'm showing you the first evidence to see. We are now in the area of the basement of the hospital. I want to show you a room where we found all the gear, the operational gear of Hamas. Hamas is using hospitals, like we showed the evidence in Shifa Hospital. In other hospitals, we are now seeing it in live in Rantisi Hospital. An operation still conducting right now. Look at what Hamas is holding inside the hospital. I want you to understand, this kind of gear is a gear for a major fight. These are explosives. These are vests with explosives. Yeah, it's a body vest for terrorists to explode on forces. Among hospitals, among patients, we have hand grenades, Kalashnikovs, and then we have the RPGs. People shooting RPGs from hospitals. This is Hamas. And in this basement, we found a motorcycle. They were all used in the massacre of the 7th of October. They even have bullets in this motorcycle. So they came back from the massacre on the 7th of October into Rantisi Hospital with hostages on a motorcycle. We're still researching this. Yards from here, we find the chair, a woman, clothes, and a rope. A rope next to the legs. And look above this. Look above it. It's a baby bottle. It's a baby bottle in a basement. Above a World Health Organization sign. This is a suspicion for an area where hostages were being held. We're now looking at an infrastructure. You don't need to build something improvisedly in a hospital in the basement. Unless you want to hold someone in the basement, you don't want anyone to see him. Again, we're in the same basement, and here we see diapers, and we see, I don't know, maybe something. We see diapers. I want you to see this room. It's in the basement of the hospital. We can see this area is a closed area from the rest of the hospital. We can see the ventilation air that was done improvisedly to this area. And we can see infrastructures that was built in here, toilets, shower, a small kitchen, will provide the terrorists their needs. Also conduct a hideout where terrorists take hostages and hide out. And I will show you now the evidence. You're now entering into the room where we suspect the hostages were being held. I want you to look at this room. People are putting curtains with nothing above, just wall. No reason to put here a curtain unless you want to film hostages and deliver movies. And now we'll show you more evidence. In this room, there is a list. This list, in Arabic, this list says, we are in an operation. The operation against Israel started in the 7th of October. This is a Guardian list where every terrorist writes his name and every terrorist has his own shift guarding the people that were here.
And in this video, people can see that how Hamas has been using the schools and hospitals and mosques for their terrorist activities. And now they're talking about civilians. We don't know who is civilian and who is Hamas, because whoever is capturing those mosques and hospitals and schools in Gaza, 90% of them are terrorists. This is a very complicated situation. My audience, you are seeing on the video the operations of Israel Defense Forces. So I definitely agree with Mr. Hoffman that media should be playing a sensible role while covering Gaza. They should not do anything, unfortunately, like BBC and CNN and New York Times. I mean, they are what they are doing. Unfortunately, I can call them the Nazi propaganda outlet. Exactly, Nazi propaganda outlet. Hitler would be very happy seeing BBC, CNN, New York Times, and what Hitler's propaganda minister played the same role as being played by Associated Press, CNN, BBC, New York Times, and most of the Western media. And unfortunately, Mr. Hoffman, you are aware that when these Hamas terrorists were entering Israel, they were accompanied by some reporters, I mean, photojournalists from Associated Press, from BBC and the New York Times. So, I mean, as a journalist, they are accompanying a group of terrorists who are entering Israel to slaughter Israelis and Jews and children and men and women. And what kind of journalism it is? This is not journalism. This is also terrorism. If there is sanctions on Hamas, if there is sanctions on Iraq and Qatar, there should be international sanctions on New York Times, CNN, BBC, and all those terrorist propaganda outlets which are giving oxygen to Hamas propaganda. Under such a very complicated and difficult situation, Mr. Hoffman, we know that countries like Qatar, they are spending billions of their zakat fund every year towards media. Qatar is also spending millions of dollars in the US academia. They are breeding students. I mean, they are funding the students who are in media, who are in diplomacy, who are in international relations. So by spending millions of dollars, they are creating their own cadres inside the US, and I don't know what happens to UK. Surely it is happening everywhere. How to stop this trend?
Well, we've been in the UK, we've been campaigning about the universities for years. The fact is, and this is unbelievable, there are a number of universities in the UK where Jewish students, the vast majority of Jewish students, won't go. And in this day and age, to have a society, a supposedly civilized society, where universities are effectively closed to Jewish students, it's beyond words. It's a disgrace. We've tried to campaign about the anti-Israel propaganda in universities, about the really disgusting meetings in universities, the speakers they invite, and it's been very difficult. The problem is academic freedom. The government is terrified to intervene because it would be accused of infringing academic freedom. And so the government, although we have a conservative government which is much more worried about what's happening in the universities than a Labour government would be, still they are unwilling to intervene in universities because they would be immediately accused of violating academic freedom. So, you know, we had an example, the lecturers, the professors and lecturers at one University College London, their trade union last week had a meeting where they endorsed a motion approving of what had happened, approving of Hamas, approving of the Intifada. This is not the students, this is the professors, the lecturers. So I think it's worse. It's worse in the United Kingdom than it is in the United States. It's becoming bad in the United States, but it's a lot worse in the United Kingdom. And the truth is that if it's impossible. It would be impossible. That you have to distinguish between sciences and humanities. In the sciences, things are not so bad as far as anti-Israel propaganda is concerned. The humanities is terrible. And the fact is that if you want a job in university as a lecturer or a professor, and you are pro-Israel, you campaign against the lies, you won't get a job, because the people who interview you will be anti-Israel. You have to be, to get a job in humanities today, you have to be anti-Israel in the UK, and that's the truth. And of course, they pass it on to their students, it's very sad. And we also have and this is terrifying. We have a big generation gap in attitudes to the current conflict. If you take people between the age of 16 and 24, the young people, they're far, far more supportive of the anti-Israel cause than people of my age, the older people. There's a big generation difference. And, you know, obviously, as these people grow up, one can only think things are going to get worse, because they're going to become adults. They're going to teach their children. I mean, in schools, we have a problem in schools with the teachers. The law says when you teach in schools, when you teach about controversial subjects like the Middle East, you have to show both sides. You have to be neutral. And that's being violated every day. The teachers there's anti-Israel literature in schools, that the teachers are themselves extreme, anti-Israel, left-wing. So there's a real problem, and I don't have to tell you what the Muslim community is like. Unfortunately, the Muslim community, there's an element of anti-Semitism which is deep inside the Muslim community in the United Kingdom. And, you know, we had a vote, Parliament voted yesterday on whether there should be a ceasefire. And the Labour Party, which is the opposition party, the leader has held out. He said, you know, if there was to be a ceasefire, it would just give Hamas the opportunity to regroup and to do again what it did on October the 7th. So he was adamant that there should not be a ceasefire. There should be what he called humanitarian pauses. 56 of his MPs voted against him. They voted for a ceasefire. Now, if you look at those 56, a lot of them are MPs, members of parliament, for constituencies with large Muslim numbers of voters. And, you know, it's what can we do? It's we have to change people's attitudes. It's difficult. There's not enough of us to change. I mean, you know, we try and do what we can, but to change what's inside people's heads is very difficult.
Mr. Hoffman, I'd like to say here something, that those who are demanding ceasefire or humanitarian pause, I'd like to tell every one of them, each of them, that under international convention and even under the UN convention, demanding a ceasefire or a humanitarian pause under such scenarios, what is happening in Gaza is tantamount to war crime. Those who are demanding ceasefire, humanitarian pause, are committing war crime. I'm clearly telling them, and everyone, whoever is talking about ceasefire or humanitarian pause, all of them are war criminals, because they can say this taking the advantage of what Mr. Hoffman has been saying, that this hostility from the school to colleges to universities and media, and also in the politics. And in the UK, United Kingdom, we are witnessing that people are taking down the posters of the missing hostages and even boasting that notoriety in front of camera. Why they're doing this? Because in London, for example, the sale of burqas and hijab has increased during the last 10 years from almost 45 to 50%. Muslim men in London are attending their mosque wearing Arab attire, and they are listening to the sermons of their imams, and imams are telling, kill Jews and Christians. So this is a dangerous scenario, dangerous situation in the United Kingdom and rest of the Western world, and majority of the people in UK, they don't understand, they don't feel, they are sitting on a ticking time bomb. You are taking out posters of the missing hostages in Israel. Tomorrow, it will happen with you when Hamas will hit London, when Hamas will take hostages in London. What you will do at that time? You are feeling entertained, seeing the Jews are suffering. That time of entertainment will end pretty soon. Islam is advancing to your land with the mission of conquest. They want to turn you into slaves, and they want to turn your country into a caliphate. If you don't want that, wake up and talk against Hamas, talk against cruelties on Israel. Mr. Hoffman, before we conclude, I would like to ask your valued opinion about, what kind of insanity it is that taking down the posters of the missing hostages. Would you please say something?
It's awful what's going on. I mean, it's the marches on every Saturday. They have a march. There were 300,000 on last Saturday. Now I was when we had the trouble in Gaza 2 years ago, we formed a counter demonstration in Whitehall to the anti-Israel march, and we were attacked, and the police had to take us out. And as they took us out, I fell over, and I didn't understand why I'd fallen. I only found out afterwards somebody had jumped on me, and the police arrested him, and he was convicted for violent disorder. But as a result of that, we will not do any pro-Israel counter demonstrations this time. It's too scary. They're too violent. The police are frightened. Okay, there's too many. The Metropolitan Police had, I don't know, 1,200 policemen on Saturday against 300,000 marchers. The police have lost control. The tearing down of posters, the police have lost control, and people have to realize that it's out of control now. It's out of control. We had the Home Secretary Suella Braverman was dismissed 2-3 days ago. She understood the problem, but she was dismissed. So people who understand the problem are being dismissed. It's very scary, and and we have a government who is supposed to be on our side. Next year, according to opinion polls, we're likely to get a left-wing government who will be much less on our side. The leader tries to be on our side, but there are so many members of parliament, as we saw yesterday with the 56 that voted against the Labour Party policy, that he's going to be overwhelmed. So it's very scary with the tearing. I mean, all we can do is hope that the hostages are freed soon. We do what we can. We try to advocate to the British government to help free the hostages, but it's very difficult to know how to do that. I mean, how does the British government help to free the hostages? Yeah. Only the IDF. Only now. I've heard. I don't know if it's true, but I've heard that there are American SEALs and British SAS in the area who may be able to help to free the hostages. So it as it was with bin Laden. It might be an international operation to free the hostages.
We have been talking to Mr. Jonathan Hoffman, and with Mr. Hoffman, all of us sincerely hope. We are continuously praying for the quickest release of the hostages. Our prayer goes for the people of Israel, members of Israel Defense Forces, and all of us believe Israel will be successfully annihilating Hamas and all those terrorist monsters in Gaza. Mr. Hoffman, thank you so much for kindly giving your valuable time and for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me, and good luck.
Thank you.